Hey everyone, Julian here. First, before anything, I want to give you, the wonderful listeners, a heartfelt apology. Our recording schedule has not been as regular as I would like it to be. The reason for the most recent break has been that I've been dreadfully ill for the last couple of weeks and just could not record. And we've had other things. Angela was ill and just some scheduling errors and stuff scheduling problems and things like that. So we are hoping to get Nerds Without Pants back on track with a regular recording schedule very soon. To not leave you hanging, I wanted to release something this week. We will have a regular episode coming out next week, but I wanted something in the interim, and I thought a really great special would be to get on with my best friend Shanna and talk about the closing days of Final Fantasy XI. They just closed the console servers March 31st, and that pretty much bars us from playing the game. I own it on PC, but she doesn't, and so many of our friends have left anyway that it felt like the right time to say goodbye to Final Fantasy XI once and for all. Now, we tried twice to record a nice episode together, but the internet gods were not in our favor. And we just had terrible connection problems. We had the same thing, actually, when we were playing Final Fantasy XI the last week. So unfortunately, we only ended up with about 20 minutes of usable material from our discussion. But I didn't want to just, leave it. I wanted to do something. This is a really important subject to me, and I thought the little bit of conversation that we did have was really good. So what I'm going to do is we're going to cut into that and go through that. Like I said, it's around 20 minutes or so. And then I'm going to come back and just kind of give some closing thoughts about my time with Final Fantasy XI. So here we go. Enjoy. This week on a special edition of Nerds Without Pants, we pack up the Mog House and say goodbye. Hello everyone and welcome to Nerds Without Pants. I am Julian, and I'm not joined as always by Patrick and Angelo. I am, however, joined by my best friend who I've talked about on the show before, who's been on the show before, in point of fact, way back in January of 2013, the special Love and the MMORPG. That would be my good friend Shanna.
Hi.
Hello. So yeah, and we're not going to rehash too much of what we talked about on that special. I do encourage people to check it out if you want to get the nitty gritty on how we started playing, not just Final Fantasy XI, but MMOs in particular, and why we stick with them and all of that good stuff. But the reason that we're doing this special is because as of March 31st, 2016, the console servers for Final Fantasy XI shut down. As I've mentioned many times, I started playing Final Fantasy XI back on the day of the PS2 launch. I actually had pre-ordered it, got it, took days off, took vacation days to really get some good time with it that first week, and have played on and off ever since. Shanna, I got you into the game about 10 years ago. And
wow, has it been that long?
Yeah, it's been about 10 years. Yeah, almost exactly. Or actually, yeah, exactly. You know, I'd say I think it was probably this month, actually. March would have been the 10-year anniversary, if memory serves.
Wow.
Yeah. And, that I've talked about it before, but, you were a complete noob, and it was fun to start you out from square one. And Final Fantasy XI was notoriously bad for not teaching people how to play that game. So I literally, taught you, okay, here's how you trade, here's how you talk to NPCs, here's how you equip your items, all that good stuff.
Which is funny because now they practically hold your hand.
They do. Hopefully people have already had a chance to check out the special feature that I wrote on Pixelbit. If not, I highly encourage you to go check that out. But yeah, it's interesting because Final Fantasy XI was like notoriously brutal, especially those first few years where they just didn't care. Like they were just, you just created a character, picked your starting country, and they were like, okay, go. And you're like, okay, well, what do I do?
I think the first time when the nation I picked was Winderston, and the first time I was there, I think I spent 4 hours just wandering around, not even realizing I could walk out a front gate to Saruta or anything. It was horrible. I'm directionally challenged too, so it was even 10 times worse than that.
Oh, we'll get to that later, yeah. I think my first, well, I mentioned last time, but like my first time playing, I've been talking to people on a PC forum that, the people that had already been playing the PC version, which came out about 6 months before the PS2 version in America. And so I already knew people on the game, and I was looking for them thinking that, you know these people, right? Because it's a really small community, not realizing that there were literally thousands upon thousands of people on any given server. And I spent a good amount of time in Sandoria just trying to look for specific people, and finally finding someone. I just kept searching by name, and I finally found someone that I knew. I was like, oh, there we go. That's the person that I need to talk to. But yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy XI was so. I mean, it was really revolutionary in a lot of ways. Being not necessarily it wasn't the first console MMO. That was actually EverQuest. Online Adventures, which came out just a little bit before Final Fantasy XI, but that was more of like this weird shoehorning of an existing PC game onto the PlayStation 2, where Final Fantasy XI, it began as a PS2 game. That's how it started development. The PC version came out first, but that's only because it was easier to produce. But the PS2 version was actually what that game was supposed to be. So it's really surreal to think of the console version shutting down. But what I also realized, I was reading an article recently, Shanna, Final Fantasy XI shutting down also marked the true end of the PlayStation 2, because that was the very last game that you could still play online on the PlayStation 2. So it was literally the end of a generation.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, definitely the end of an era. It was interesting because, going back to like how tough the game was to start, they've made huge changes to it in like the last, maybe 2-3 years, would you say? Or has it been longer?
I'd have to say at least the past 4.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been so in and out of it. I've come back, for little spurts and then gone away and then tried to make a really good push of it. But yeah, I mean, and I mentioned this in the feature that I wrote, but they might have gone a little too far in making Final Fantasy accessible.
I don't know about that. A lot of it was I can understand why people were upset when so many things changed, because you put a lot of time into finishing some of those storylines, like Chains of Promathia or the Rise of Xylart or anything. At the end of it, you could practically solo that stuff, and giving us the trust NPCs and was really helpful because the population was dying. And
well, yeah, and those trust NPCs are literally like computer controlled party members that can fill out your party and are pretty darn strong, and pretty much eliminates that. Well, I mean, it had been that way for a while already. I mean, I think when the Abyssia expansion came out, that kind of marked the death of the traditional party in Final Fantasy XI. Where, you basically just had like big groups of people just going into this area and power leveling, but not really having to worry about pulling enemies or tanking or timing their abilities and stuff like that, because it was just
or learning your job.
Yeah, but people started leveling so quickly.
It was the death of learning how to play your job.
Yeah, I mean, you have so many people who started just like leveling everything to 75 and then later on to 99. And, not only just to do it, not really to actually master the job or anything like that.
You could enter those zones at level 30. Get into a party. I heard of people paying people with Gil the currency and staying in a party for like 2 days and they'd get up and leave their console, and they'd be level 99 by the time they got back.
Right. Well,
it's ridiculous.
You were helping me get my Dark Knight to level 99, and the area that we were in, you said, oh yeah, I brought a friend out here who was like level 30 on his thief, and then when we left, he was level like 85. That was just an afternoon, and it's like, damn. I can understand a lot of why they did what they did. You have this aging player base, and they are starting to get bored. So it's like, hey, here's a really easy way to try out a new job. If you want to all of a sudden go from melee to a caster job, but you don't want to spend hundreds of hours getting it, from level 1 to max level. There's easier ways to do it now. You can kind of just do it by yourself. You don't have to worry about looking for a party. So I understand parts of it, but I kind of wish that they had found a way to get back to that traditional party and maybe just make it a little more flexible. Like maybe not necessarily have that need to have a tank, a healer, a damage dealer and a puller, but maybe have it to where like you just needed like a group of 6 and they can work together however they need to. But you need to be together. Cause that was always, it's strange for me to say because I'm so antisocial, but in Final Fantasy XI, like that was the thing that I loved about it, was the social aspect. And, really like it was such a rough game that everybody kind of became really close knit because you had to cling together in order to succeed.
That's true.
You and I have lots of really fond memories of, Shanna, you have friends that you played with every day on Final Fantasy XI that you would Skype with or talk on the phone with. I know you still do, but the stories of your exploits are kind of legendary at this point.
I have to give 11 credit because not being terribly social in real life, I guess 11 gave me a chance to be a little more outgoing with the people. And dang, one of my best friends lives in another country, and a few others live across the United States, and I never would have met him if it wasn't for online gaming.
Absolutely. All right, and unfortunately, as I said, that's all that we have from Shanna. But we still talked. We had our connection issues, but we were still talking and everything. And one of the things that kept coming up was we kept going back to the feeling of how challenging Final Fantasy XI was, especially in the early days, and how that really fostered the community. And we really did have to cling together in order to progress. Once you hit level 10, you had to get into parties because unless you wanted to go very, very slowly at a snail's pace, you just weren't going to gain levels if you weren't working together. And most of the missions and quests really couldn't be done without a full group or sometimes 3 full groups of people. So, that was a really important thing. And it is responsible for us both having very vivid memories of specific parties and specific party members, even people that we only played with like once or twice, just because, you get together and you level up with somebody for 3-4 hours in a stretch, and you joke around and you shoot the shit and stuff like that. And it's just a lot of fun, and you get to know people that way. And, you know, she was talking about how, she had mentioned to me that, in those last days, she was talking to one of her friends online, and, they were saying how they had tried other MMOs, but nothing really was the same as Final Fantasy XI, to which she said, well, nothing is ever going to be like Final Fantasy XI again. And I've been thinking about that really hard, and she might be right. But I know that the MMORPG has to change. The model that World of Warcraft made popular, that's not really working anymore. And I don't think that there's going to be any big progress made in that space until one of two things happens. Either graphics get to such an amazing level that when you step into, or when you log into a game, you actually feel like you're in a completely new world. Or VR becomes like, you know, the juggernaut that people seem to think it will be. And we end up with like a headset and just visiting this virtual world that feels like a new space, which I guess is kind of connected, you know, but I'm thinking more like if you've ever seen the anime .hack sign, which I've mentioned on Nerds Without Pants a couple times, you know, where, you know, it's this very vivid landscape and your characters emote in a very believable and realistic way. They don't feel like robotic avatars. I think it's going to be something along those lines that brings a renaissance to the MMORPG. But in the meantime, and I mentioned this to Shanna, unfortunately that's when our connection started to get crappy, but there's been some strides in video game design in like the last, I don't know what, like 4 or 5 years, where there seems to be this push towards challenging games. You know, games like Dark Souls and Demon Souls even, and roguelikes like Rogue Legacy and Spelunky even, they seem almost like badges of honor for players that are able to get through them. And that made me really think, like, you know, people are hungry for a challenge. People don't want their hands held all the time. And some of the modern MMOs may have gone too far in doing that. I mean, it's one thing to, you know, you definitely want to have some sort of sense of progression. And, you know, if you're on a quest, you want some sort of tracking in game of that so that you don't lose the plot if you go away for a couple weeks. But, you know, you don't necessarily want a big flashing arrow pointing you where you need to go and, you know, go talk to this dude. And I was also thinking of certain online games that have had a little bit of a phenomenon recently, like DayZ and Rust. You know, these games where, while they may not be massively multiplayer, they are multiplayer. And they kind of just throw you into a world and say, okay, survive. And the way that people end up surviving or screwing each other over, or just having this own narrative is something that's very interesting to me. And I think that could be a really cool thing if it was coupled with like a really, really tough MMORPG where, you know, it's a game that requires either guile to like maybe trick people into helping you, or, you know, straight up like real dedicated teamwork in order to succeed. You know, if you have to worry about bands of other players that are like marauding together and you just want to experience, you know, the leveling system or, you know, the quest system and stuff like that, and you have to team up in order to not only succeed with your goals, but also help each other out and avoid, you know, the, you know, maybe more unruly players on the server. I think that could be really interesting. You know, I don't really know what the future entails for, you know, the MMO as a whole. I do think that even with the console servers going offline, that Final Fantasy XI is still going to be doing quite well on the PC. Square Enix has reported in the past that it is the most successful, or the most financially successful Final Fantasy game of all time. You know, and it's been going hot, you know, nice and steady for 13 years now. So that's nothing to sniff at. And I think it could still go for a while. And, you know, it's hard to say if they're going to release another expansion or what's going to happen there. I still have my fingers crossed for maybe a PS3 PS4 or Xbox One port, I feel like that wouldn't be a difficult thing to do. It doesn't necessarily have to look, super spiffy. I mean, as long as it's just like a little sharper, like what you would find on a high-end PC with like the settings turned all the way up. I think that would be fine for most people. And there's still the opportunity for them to go free to play. It bears mentioning that Final Fantasy XI is one of the only paid subscription MMOs that isn't World of Warcraft that's still alive and kicking. So, I think that's not a small feat by any means, especially in this day and age. So, there's that. And I mean, Final Fantasy XIV is there, of course. Shanna has moved on to that, and she's playing that. But I think for both of us, it doesn't quite scratch that same itch as Final Fantasy XI did. But, now that she's on there, I might try to get on and play with her and maybe rekindle some of that magic that we had in Final Fantasy XI. But, my life has changed a lot in the 12 years that I've been playing this game, so it's hard to say. The thing that I can't stress enough is just how important the people that I met in that game were to me. You meet hundreds of players in a game like that if you're playing it long enough. And, some of them come and go, and some of them are flashes in the pan. Others you get to spend a lot of time with, and you really grow a fondness for. And before I sign off, I really wanted to mention some of the players, and it's a very small number of them. I couldn't possibly list everybody, and it's been a lot of years since I've talked to some of them, so I've probably forgotten a few people, but some of the ones that really stick out, that really were there for me at the beginning and the end. Masupa, Thrunts, Bub Rub, Lollipop, Josiah KF, Isabeau, Navarre, Yenri, Conwise, Atalia, Your Mom's Fantasy, Ethicant, Fizzyfoo, Ania, Annabelle, Zakes, Rebrab, Imara, Dragon, and of course Yamika, my best friend in the virtual world and in real life. Those are people that struck a chord with me and that they made me laugh and they made me think, and they brought me out of my shell, and some of them I talked to outside of the game, some of them I no longer talk to, but at the end of the day, those bonds are something that I'll never forget. And I said it in the piece over Pixelbit, but that's a very powerful thing, and I don't know if there'll ever be a game like Final Fantasy XI to do that to me, but I'm really glad that I had the chance to play it for as long as I did. I do regret that I didn't play it as much as I could have, but I kind of always thought that it would be there, and unfortunately it no longer is unless I want to get on the PC and be all by my lonesome, but that kind of defeats the purpose of a massively multiplayer game. So yeah, that's going to do it for this shortened special edition of Nerds Without Pants. Thanks for listening. I know it's not the most exciting thing to hear me drone on by myself for a long period of time. I don't find that to be very fun, but hopefully you get something out of it. If you haven't checked it out already, I do heartily recommend you, I do very much encourage you to go over to pixelbit.com and check out the feature that I wrote. It's called A Fond Farewell to Final Fantasy XI, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes, of course. As far as the show itself, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Julian_Titus. You can find Angelo at A Roguish Ham, Patrick at Some Boss, and the podcast itself at NWPcast. And yeah, if Shanna isn't on social media, but if you had any questions or comments for her, you can tweet them to me or put them in the comments at pixelbit.com. Or, if you are one of the players that I mentioned, or some of the players that I mentioned, hit me up and we can reminisce a little bit. I think that'd be a really cool thing. So, if you were on Final Fantasy XI and you are on Seraph server, which later on got rolled into Bismarck server, let me know, especially if you were on Seraph server, because that was a rough time when we lost our home. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back in a week with a regular episode. I think we're going to have site director Nick on for that one, so that'll be a lot of fun. Again, sorry for the delay in recording. Life happens sometimes, but we're hoping for a very strong 2016. So hopefully we get back on track. So as for myself, Patrick and Angela, who aren't here, my best friend, Shanna, and all of the players, the ones that I mentioned, the ones that I forgot, the ones that just helped me once or twice along the way. Thanks for listening, and keep it pantsless, Internet. Goodbye.